This episode is brought to you by Prime Video. In the small town of Holland, Michigan, nothing is ever what it seems. Behind the tulip festivals and pretty houses lay dark secrets that threaten to tear a marriage apart. Nicole Kidman stars in this darkly twisted thriller about a wife and mother whose quest to uncover her husband's secrets may get her more than she bargained for. Holland, streaming on Prime Video March 27th.
Revolutionize your cooking with the Tefal Infrared Air Fryer. Watch as your food crisps up through a large lighted window and delight in faster, crispier, and juicier results with no preheating thanks to Tefal's advanced infrared technology. Discover the future of cooking and bring innovation into your kitchen by visiting Tefal.com.
Hi, everybody, and welcome back to A Catholic's Perspective, the podcast all about being a young Catholic surviving in a secular world. Today, I have with me a very special guest. We have Emily Wilson. Welcome, Emily. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. It's such a delight to be here, to have a little fun, chatting about life and its obstacles, the obstacles of being a young person, in our culture today. I'm so delighted to just be here and chat about all these things.
Yeah, I think it's really important because I have a lot of young women who listen to the podcast and are just really fed up with the dating world. Now, I could probably say the same thing for the guys. I'm gonna be honest, but
Mhm.
I'm a girl, so I'm gonna talk to the girlies here
Mhm.
and just throw it out there that it's like the dating world is really hard these days. And you're not just dealing with, the secular side of things and the secular side of dating coming into Catholic dating, but also having that depth and that intention with dating. Have you noticed that too?
Absolutely. Yes. Dating has evolved a lot over the years, and the breakdown of communication in the culture, I think, is one of the main issues. And some of the gals out there will be like, Amen, hallelujah. The breakdown of communication and everything really coming to a surface level, I think, is a huge first problem, right? I mean, there are so many issues, and we could talk about these for days. But one of the things I think, and we had a couple over last night, we were actually talking about the problems in the dating culture. And one of the things is the breakdown of fatherhood, which people
Mhm.
talk a lot about, the breakdown of fatherhood. And we were talking last night about how I meet a lot of young men who don't know how to communicate because their father didn't teach them how to be a person who communicates. He didn't communicate effectively himself. He didn't see male role models in his life. And this is not true for all men. You have to make 4,000 disclaimers when you say anything these days. This isn't
True.
true for all men. But I meet a lot of young men who say, I was never taught how to communicate as a man, whether in friendship, whether in relationship, whether in pursuing a woman. I don't know how that looks. And over my, teens and college into my 20s, I have had to learn how to do that. And I think
Mm.
that's part of the human condition for us all in the breakdown of communication in the culture. But I think a lot of young men that I've met and spoken with, they struggle with that. And it's a process of learning for them how to communicate well. And on the other side, it's the same for women. Our culture is allergic to depth, it's allergic to commitment. Not culture, but like it's teaching people to be allergic to depth and to commitment. It's, instantaneous everything. I tell women, men are not Wikipedia pages.
True.
Sometimes that patience that is challenging. It's like you sit down with a man on a first date, you're like, I want to know everything about him. I want to know if he's the man that I'm supposed to marry. And it doesn't work that way. It's not an instant pot, right? So some of these major issues contributes to it being a very messy, challenging situation. And a lot of the Catholic people I talked with, not all in their 20s, women in their 30s. I have friends in their 40s who are still looking for a good man. The frustrations are very real and they're there. And a lot of it has to do with this lack of communication and lack of depth and desire for everything to be right now, chip chop. You're like, "Ew, we have to take time to do this." And that can be hard.
Yeah, I think it's definitely difficult because a lot of times when you are waiting for a spouse, when I was waiting even for a spouse, I'm like, come on already, like let's get on it already, like let's figure it out. And having to wait on God's time and realizing that his time is perfect and realizing that maybe, there are things that you can do in your own life to better yourself, to be the person that your spouse deserves one day. And I feel like a lot of people get stuck with the, "Oh, I'll get my spouse and then," or "I'll get
Mhm.
married and then I'll fix this thing about my life or I'll get rid of this addiction. And I've noticed a lot that when women go into dates, like you were talking about, like men are not Wikipedia pages. When they go
Mhm.
into dates, they have like this checklist, like, okay, are you making this enough money, like this amount of money? Are you a family person? Do you have a good relationship? It's not cookie cutter. Every
Mhm.
guy is different. And I really do think it comes to complementing personality types and realizing that there are some things that just are not important enough to be deal breakers. I knew a
Mhm.
girl, she had like her deal breaker was the guy she had to date had to have curly hair. But every single guy she dated who had curly hair was not the right fit, but she turned
Mhm.
down every other guy. Now she's married. This was like 5 years ago. Now she's married to a guy who's literally blonde and the straightest hair ever. But it's because she realized that material things don't last. Like he could be bald in 5 years. You never know. Um
It
what
is the
really
truth.
yeah, and what really matters is, like, their soul and, like, how they love God and how they love you and their personality, because their personality, you know, it changes over time and everything, but, people grow and mature and learn. For the
Mhm.
most part, that love for you and everything, that doesn't go away, and so I'm always just like, "Just don't try and force something, like, just let it naturally, organically happen," you know?
Totally. And be open, okay? People get so upset. I mean, people really, really get upset about me saying this because people get really bent out of shape about, oh, you shouldn't marry someone you're not physically attracted to, blah, 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 which I totally agree with. And I talk about this all the time. And the messages that I get are very sweet. I got one last week. I'll tell you about it in a second. Openness is key. And this is what I say. Oh my goodness. I've been married for 9 years now, okay, which isn't like 25, but it's not 3, okay, so we've been in it for a little while. We have been through ups and we have been through downs. Let me just tell you, when our first son was about to be born, my husband got in a surfing accident. It's a very long story. He had a blood clot that was in his leg, and they sent him to physical therapy, not knowing that he had a blood clot in his leg, and they massaged that blood clot into his lungs. So he
Oh,
had a pulmonary embolism with 7 blood clots in his lungs. I was like 32 weeks pregnant, about to give birth. And, people kept coming into the hospital room looking at me like, oh my gosh, and looking at my husband in the hospital bed like, oh my gosh, what is going on here? It was one of the hardest times ever. During the last weeks of pregnancy, first pregnancy, you're supposed to be like, people are doting on you and, like getting you things. You can't do anything. I
yeah.
was taking care of me. I was taking care of the baby. I was taking care of my husband. Okay. And I tell women, like during that time, we got to labor and delivery. I had a C-section. The whole thing was just absolutely insane. My sweet husband, could started walking again. Yeah, shortly before that. And I tell women at no point during that time, right, when we were just in it together, like in it, in suffering, in our vows, at no point where I was like, I'm so glad you're so handsome. I'm so glad, like, I'm just so attracted to you because you're so handsome. No. Am I attracted to him as a person physically? Of course. But when the going gets going, which honestly, most of marriage is the going is going, and you're just like, wow, this is a whole lot, right? Especially with children. We have 3 children now. The soul of a person, the core of who this man is, that is the ticket. That is the key, right? When it is tough as nails, right? When you're looking later on in our lives with rebellious teenagers or when our parents are aging and ill, like the real gritty stuff of life, right? The soul of a person is everything. So I tell women this, be open, right? Just be open to something developing, growing. And last week I got a message from a gal. She said, I was at your talk at Seek. I don't know what year this was. But in the talk, I talked about being open and how you just never know. And you think like, I'm going to marry a man who looks like this with curly hair or whatever it is. He has to be over 6 feet, whatever it is, all these things that you hope for. And she said, you talked about being open in that talk. And a man asked me to dinner after that talk. And I never would have said yes if you had not said that in your talk. And I am now engaged to that man. And I
That's
said,
how you know.
amen, hallelujah. And I talk about in the talk how, I get these messages a lot because I harp on openness, the importance of it a lot. And a gal who messaged me, she said, I'm engaged to a man who's bald. And had I not heard your messaging, I never would have been open to dating a bald man because I just wasn't attractive to me at the time. Right. And I was open because you told me to be. And now I'm engaged to that bald man and we're going to get married in a couple of months, and that man's bald head is not going to matter in their life, right? Like it really doesn't. When she had these ideas of what she wanted and what she thought her husband would look like, right? It's like the physical reality of a person, it A fades away, and B, like when you're just looking at each other like, man, we're gonna hang on to our vows, your
Mhm.
heart and your soul and your pursuit of holiness is what matters.
Still getting around to that fix on your car? You got this. On eBay, you'll find millions of parts guaranteed to fit. Doesn't matter if it's a major engine repair or your first time swapping your windshield wipers. eBay has that part you need, ready to click perfectly into place for changes big and small. Loud or quiet, find all the parts you need at prices you'll love. Guaranteed to fit every time. But you already know that. eBay. Things, people, love. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply.
Does it ever feel like you're a marketing professional just speaking into the void? Well, with LinkedIn ads, you can know you're reaching the right decision makers. You can even target buyers by job title, industry, company, seniority, skills. Wait, did I say job title yet? Get started today and see how you can avoid the void and reach the right buyers with LinkedIn ads. We'll even give you a $100 credit on your next campaign. Get started at linkedin.com/results. Terms and conditions apply.
Yeah. It's
Does
so
that make
true.
sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the amount of times that I've also talked about how men are attracted physically, usually to a woman or something, but that attraction varies for every man. You don't have to look like Kim Kardashian. You could
Mhm,
be beautiful to him because of the way you laugh, because of the
mhm,
way that you carry yourself. And
mhm,
for women, a lot of the times attraction comes after getting to know them. I
mhm,
think a lot of women automatically think it's supposed to be this starstruck movie like, oh, we just fell in love, Ryan Gosling and
mhm,
whatever type of idea. And in reality, it's really more of a slow burn for a lot of
mhm,
women.
mhm,
I think a lot of women tend to look at a guy and be like, nah, before even getting to know him
mhm,
because of the physical appearance, like you're talking about.
mhm,
And I wanted to get your take on this too, because this is something that's kind of new that girls have been emailing me about. I don't know if you've heard of this, but women, because of social media, are now extra picky, certain, not like Catholic women necessarily, but a lot of women
mhm.
are extra
Just in
picky about
general.
their spouse because of how it will make them look on social media and how
Mm.
their spouse will fit into their aesthetic and how their spouse, and I know this is like off topic, but I was just like flabbergasted when I heard about this. I'm like, how materialistic and shallow do you need to be to pick your spouse based off of how he's going to look on your Instagram feed? Like, what?
Yes, you do that. You are setting yourself up for a life of sorrow and sadness because you are choosing a spouse for all the wrong reasons, right? I'm not saying, and I make, these 4,000 disclaimers. I'm not saying date a person who doesn't take care of themselves, whether you're a
True.
man or a woman, right? People, one girl said once, you try kissing a man with bad oral hygiene. And I said, I am not telling people to date people who don't brush their teeth. I'm not. I am not telling you to date a person who has no clue how to take care of themselves, because a person who has no clue how to take care of themselves makes a terrible spouse. A terrible spouse. If you do not know how to care for yourself first, you cannot care well for another person. But what I tell them, right, when it comes to this, right, like picking someone, for the aesthetic of your life, aesthetics of your life don't matter. But at the same time, I think one of the things in this whole realm of dating is asking, like, what are Catholic men looking for, or what are Catholic women looking for, and trying to become that, right?
Mhm.
When it comes to taking care of ourselves as a person, when you're looking at being marriage minded, we like become the best version of yourself because it glorifies God to become the best version of yourself, right? Don't look at some list or some talk that you've heard, like, what are Catholic men looking for, and try to become that list. When you become the best version of yourself, whether marriage is your vocation or not, it gives glory to God. When you are healthy, when you are eating well, when you are strong, when you are brushing your teeth, when you are sleeping enough, when you are taking care of yourself, we glorify God. Our bodies are a temple of the Holy Spirit. And when you, like, if marriage is what God has called you to, when you're taking care of yourself, you will be the most attractive version of yourself, because that you're giving glory to God. You are free in who you are and who God created you to be, and you're not trying to fit a list. You're not trying to fit a mold. You are trying to be most wholeheartedly yourself. And that is an amazing thing. So, to the women, you know, choosing men or men choosing women to fit into their aesthetic, Instagram fades away just like, looks fade away. It's not going to last forever, even though right now we think it will. Instagram, whatever social media we're talking about, to pick a person because you think they fit into your life, like in the way of aesthetics, I mean, you're going to crash and burn so hard, and you're not even going to realize how hard you're going to crash and burn until the rubber meets the road and you're like, wow, marriage is challenging, right? The road to holiness is challenging in and of itself, but marriage is very challenging. And to pick a person, based on looks only is not going to be
Mm,
good. That's all I got
no,
to say about that.
I agree. And I have seen firsthand these relationships just from like the dating perspectives, where it's like they're just dating people who fit the aesthetic that they want. And that's causing all of these problems now in the relationship before they're
Uh-huh.
even married. And they're like, yeah, let's get married. Why not? And it's just like, oh, maybe see the red flags where they are before you make that type of commitment. Now, granted, a lot of people don't get married in the church anymore, so it's not a real marriage in the sight of God
Mhm,
necessarily.
mhm,
But they still have to go through like divorce courts and things when it doesn't work out. And no fault divorce is rampant these days. It's so high
mhm,
that it's just like, why even get married? And then that's what causes the whole mistake of forever boyfriend and girlfriends and cohabitation. And that leads to resentment and
mhm,
long-term relationships. And what blows my mind, Emily, is the fact that people will move in together, buy a house together, buy a car together, have a baby together, get a dog together, but
mhm,
will not get married. They
mhm,
do everything and they don't
mhm,
get married. And I'm like, I mean, okay, first of all, there's risk involved, but there's risk involved with all of those other things. And
mhm,
I think it's the priorities that are really backwards where people are like, well, if we get married, like, and we find out it doesn't really work out like 10 years down the road or whatever, then, we got to go through like divorce courts or whatever. I'm like, why is divorce even on the table to begin with?
mhm,
Like, if
mhm,
you are getting
mhm,
married, divorce should never be on the table to begin with. And I think that's a major mistake that a lot of people have is they just think, oh, if it's not going to work out, I'll get a divorce. Or unfortunately, I've heard this as well, I'll get an annulment. Like, we'll
mhm,
just get an annulment if it doesn't work out. It's like, no, there's actual things that have to happen in order for an annulment to take place, which means the
mhm,
marriage is never valid. It's not just Catholic divorce. It's
mhm.
the sacrament was never valid to begin with because somebody lied or there was some sort of misunderstanding. There was something there.
Yeah,
For example, like if you married somebody and they said, "Oh, I don't want kids," and you're like, "Oh, well, that's grounds for annulment because you
correct.
that person." I
Yes.
go ahead. Yeah, I just want to know your thoughts on that. That's crazy.
Yeah, absolutely. What I would say to people, yes, I mean, it is rampant in the culture to get a house and a dog and have a child, which is a beautiful thing. Every child is beautiful. What I want to tell so many people is commitment is beautiful.
Mm,
Real commitment, the commitment of vowing your lives to one another, right? Taking vows seriously, you know, in good times and in bad, right? In sickness and in health. So much of our culture is built around convenience. And a lot of time, vows are not convenient. Vows require a gritty surrender, they require a gritty yes, they require a gritty follow through that has been lost a lot in our culture. So, commitment, right, is such a magnificent thing to commit to something with your life and say, I am committing to this for life. A lot of times I will talk to women and they say, the problem is that they're now stuck in this relationship because they own a home together, because they have a dog together, or whatever it is. And they say, like, it's too hard to leave, right? And that is like such a challenging thing is that so many women I talk to, they're playing marriage, right? And they're playing house, but they realize, like, oh my gosh, I want to leave, right? And I tell them, first of all, you're not married. You can leave. Like, if this is not right for you, leave as soon as you can, right? Start just building your life outside of this. If this is not the right thing for you and you know it deep down in your heart, go and do that. Have the courage to leave. But it just in looking at, right, like the false sense of security, that owning all these things with some person, when you have marriage there, for that security, the beauty of the security of covenant and vows, like there, it's hard to describe, like the beauty of that, of knowing like my husband loved me enough to commit his entire life to me. Like all the women out there listening, that is what never settle for less than that. A man saying, I love you enough that I will commit my entire life to you. The security in that, the beauty in that, the grit and the surrender in that, of saying, there's all these other women in the world and I'm going to commit to one, is so countercultural. It's so beautiful. It's so magnificent. And that is what the kind of commitment you women out there listening are worthy of. A gal wrote on my Instagram last week. She said, my dad always said that forever is a long time to settle. Forever is a long time to settle.
True.
So, if you're living in this house and you own this house with this man and you're like, I'm settling and we are not married, right? Don't settle like that forever. Go out there, like have the courage to go and like build a different life outside of this life of settling that deep down in your heart that you are.
Yeah. And I think there is an emptiness there when, women are giving their men wifey privileges and not getting the wifey privilege, of
Yes.
being his wife.
Mhm.
And we hold that standard, we decide where and when we give them what, and I do believe to an extent women do control even the sex, they control
Mhm.
that. And so if that is, I know back in high school I knew a lot of girls who had sex just to keep their boyfriends around. And
Mhm.
again, that's another way of settling, and you're not just, committing a mortal sin in that, way, or grave sin in general, but you are selling yourself to keep someone around
Mhm.
who God clearly might not want for you.
Mhm.
You might
Mhm.
have somebody better who knows how to respect you and give you what you need and what you want and what you're actually hungry for if you
For
just give
sure.
him the chance.
Mhm. Yeah.
And I
What
feel like
has
we
it been
don't.
like for you to live out your vows in in this past year? Like now you're living this experience of like, oh my gosh, when we like have a fight, like we're here, we live together or whatever it
Mhm.
is, like the grittiness of that. What has that been like for you in the past year, like living inside of these vows?
It's been so amazing. I think mainly because there is that security of
Mm.
not just the grace we receive from marriage, but also the stability knowing that we're in this together no matter what. Like we're both 100% in. My dad was diagnosed with cancer almost a year ago. It's a terminal cancer. And this was a couple months before we got married. And so being engaged, going through marriage prep, my husband's going for PhD programs. He was finishing his master's at the time, and going through all of this, we really realized like this is a test, like to see if we really can handle these big moments together. And ever since then, having to go through all of that, treatments with my dad and long hospital stays and marriage planning and prepping and everything and all of that, it really did show me that, my husband is selfless. He's able to
Mm.
sacrifice for me. And it showed him that I am not just, um, that sounds bad, but like I'm competent. I'm a woman who not only, I'm not a victim. It's like I'm
Mm.
going to get something done. I'm not going to put it all on my husband to do. I'm going to do as much as I can to help each other out. This mentality that I actually have and we implemented recently, which has helped a ton, is and it kind of sounds bad at first when I have to explain it, but
Okay, I'm open. I'm listening. I'm
cool.
here.
It's basically like acting like a single parent. Act that if you don't get it done, it's not going to get done. But when both of you act that way towards chores, towards laundry. For example, I will cook breakfast and I'll be like, okay, I'm going to get those dishes during my break when I'm done. But then my husband's working, he takes a break, he sees dishes need to get done, he just does it. He doesn't, it's not a competition. It's not like, oh, I did the
Mm.
dishes yesterday, it's your turn. It's, oh, the dishes need to be done. Let me do that real quick while I have 5 minutes and I'm making my coffee. Oh, the laundry needs to be changed around. I'm just going to do that real quick while I'm, waiting for my toast to cook.
Mhm.
Um, that has really been a game changer for both of us, realizing that, this isn't just a competition. And I think that can form resentment. Spouses competing against each other. I
Mm,
hate that. The whole like,
mhm,
oh, I did this yesterday. It's your turn to cook. It's your turn to do this. It's your turn. I'm like, we're not siblings. We're not
mhm,
in this rivalry where it's like, well, that's not my dish, so I don't need to wash it. It's like, grow up. Like, come on, guys,
mhm, mhm.
Um, so that has been a huge game changer for me. And when I say that, people are like, "Oh, well, doesn't that just feed resentment?" I'm like, "Not when both of you do it. Both of you have to do it. That's
Mhm.
if only one of you is doing it, then you are basically a single parent. But when both of you do it, you guys are working as a team and you love each other and it helps a lot get stuff done."
It's so true. Shout out to all the single parents out there. You're amazing. There is an amazing single mother who lives on our street, and she is just so resilient and incredible and loves her children so much. And I just love her so much. I see her every day, and she's just such a warrior woman, and she's amazing. In terms of like marriage, right? Being so many people say it's like a 50-50 thing. And my parents have this beautiful marriage. I mean, they're just amazing and they've been through so much. And then my dad was on a plane once with a newlywed couple. And they said, "Oh, what's your best marriage advice?" Of course, they're going on the honeymoon. And he said, "It's not 50-50, it's 0-100. If
Mhm.
both of you are putting in 100, right? All the time. And sometimes there are times when we can't, in times of sickness and suffering. When my husband had his pulmonary embolism, he could not give 100, right? I had to do like physically everything. He's still there with his heart, mind, soul, and spirit. But if you give as best you can 100% and not think like, oh, that person will take care of it, right? Or whatever it is, it really, your marriage can really flourish. And again, it is not like easy to do all the time. Sometimes it's not possible. But if you really have that mentality of 0-100, like it really makes a huge difference.
Yeah, I think one girl, she commented under one of my posts. She said, or a live stream I had, and she said, when I'm upset at my husband or he annoys me, I make myself do something nice for him because
Mm,
somehow that helps." And I think that's so true. Where it's like sometimes we're just not in the right mindset or something, but we shouldn't take
totally.
that out on our spouse. Maybe there's times where it does need to be communicated, like, "Hey, whatever."
Yeah, for
But
sure.
I do think sometimes, we get overwhelmed, especially as women. I spider web. Like I spider web like crazy. I get overwhelmed. I kind of do too much. And my husband will come in and just do something like funny or something. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, I can't believe you would do that. I don't actually do that. But then I'm like, do you want some toast, babe? And I'll just,
Mhm,
because I do think it's almost like a retraining of the brain. We have to kind of squeeze out this feminist nonsense that we've been fed our whole lives where men are stupid and dumb and can't do
mhm,
anything and women really run the house and we wear the pants because I mean despite what we think, I mean that really has been saturated in our culture and sitcoms for years and still to this day in TV shows and stuff. And I think realizing that like okay, my husband doesn't cut the potato the same way I do, so what, the potato gets cut, like,
mhm,
and I really do think that we have this issue of we want things the way we were when we were single, but it really like marriage in relationships in general, they take sacrifice. Even
mhm,
friendships, they take sacrifices.
mhm,
They take times of hardship, and everyone knows that a friendship that stands the test of time are the ones that you went through the hardships with and came
mhm.
out of them. And so it's like, why not the same for your marriage and relationship?
Oh, absolutely. Service. Service has been totally lost because we live in a culture of me, me, me. How much can I get? How
Mhm.
much can I get? How much can life be about me? And that like just mode of service all the time in your head, serving, loving, giving, right, is paramount. It should always be at the forefront. I mean, if we're really striving for holiness, to serve and love, not just like, oh, like how can I make my husband happy today? It's like how can I serve him well today? And a lot of people like they hear about serving your husband. They're like, serving your husband. Oh my gosh. It's like, no, we serve each other, right? Marriage is service and love of one another. So, how can I serve him well today? Not as a servant in the typical sense of the word that people think, but service is that sacrifice, making sacrifices for one another out of love, out of joy, out of commitment to those vows that you're talking about, that you're living now with your husband in your home every single day, right?
Yeah. exactly. And I really do think that, that one Bible verse that comes up, like, wives, be subject to your husbands,
Mhm.
but then husbands, love your wives the way that Christ loves the church. And what does Christ do? He died for his church. He had to sacrifice himself, his life, for his
Yes.
bride.
Yes, when people leave that part off, I'm like, you left off a really important part. It all goes together, right? We can't just click one line out of there. It's like, no, that whole, and we could talk about this until Christmas, but that whole section, right? It's supposed to all go together. Everything that he's saying is so important. We are under the same mission, and both of us serve each other in beautiful, Christ-like ways. That's what we're called to.
Yes, exactly. And I think a lot of people just twist that. And it's unfortunate because I think, people, I mean, marriage is a vocation, it's truly
Mhm.
meant to make us holy. It's not supposed to be easy. And people just need to accept the graces that God's giving them and realize that there is something way bigger at play here than
Mhm.
just a relationship.
It is so true. Oh my gosh, so true. And I think one of the things that the enemy does is sneak in, both in dating and marriage, when it comes to all of this stuff, is the comparison card. The comparison card
Mhm.
is in dating, right? It's like the enemy sneaks in. He's like, look what her boyfriend does for her. Your
Yeah.
boyfriend doesn't do that for you. And so many women, I'll speak to the women too because I am a woman. So many women fritter about like, oh my gosh, like, is this the right relationship? Because my boyfriend doesn't do that, but Janet's boyfriend does that for her. Like, oh, I don't know. And it like blinds us from the strengths of the man that we're dating or the man that we're married to, right? It's a big, big card that the enemy uses in marriage of like, oh my gosh, look at how I don't know. You see a man and woman like at their ultrasound, for instance, and she's like filming her husband, and her husband is like the golden retriever kind of husband, right?
Yep.
Who's like, oh my gosh, and he's like saying all these beautiful things. And a woman whose husband is less expressive could be watching this video and think, like, my husband didn't react like that when we went to our first ultrasound. Like, what's wrong with him, right? And this comparison card of like, okay, your husband doesn't express himself in that way, but there are so many other beautiful things about him. But the enemy wants you to focus on all of the things that, other boyfriends or men are doing so that you start to have those seeds of resentment or those seeds of doubt, like, oh, is he the right guy because he doesn't do things like that, And like, the Lord, can break through all of that to say, no, just focus on what's in front of you, focus on the here and now, rather than looking at everybody else's relationships or marriage to see what everybody else is doing. Stay focused on me, fix your eyes on me, and stay focused here. That's where the Lord wants us to be for a thriving, dating life and marriage.
Yeah. And I think that's so important because at the end of the day, a marriage that's not rooted in Christ is bound to fall apart,
Hmm. Hmm.
because the enemy, if it gets its foothold, like the number one thing Satan tries to destroy is the nuclear family.
Uh-huh.
Because if he destroys the nuclear family, he can destroy society. And that's already kind of been proven with, like we were talking about earlier, dads not being dads or
Yeah.
being
Hmm.
around,
Hmm.
and boys not learning how to become men, and women not really sure how to be women either. I mean, there's this whole disconnect now. And
Hmm.
I know a lot of our generations also healing from sexual sin and learning how to navigate that when pursuing a spouse, or how to even bring that about. Most people have had sex these days. So
Hmm.
I think, overall, there's just a big kind of, I don't know, I want to say just kind of like a rift between what dating's supposed to be and what it is today. And people are desperately trying to get back to what it used to be, but they're
Hmm.
just not sure how to do that. And
Hmm.
I've seen that a lot. And, I feel really bad for my generation and the dating culture that we're in today. It's difficult.
It so is. And, all of these issues, I always tell them, young women that I talk to, young men that I talk to, just like the healing power of Jesus is so real. And whatever life you've lived, whatever choices you've made, to come back to the Lord, right? I don't ever like the prodigal son, the story of it. Sometimes we talk about it so much that it becomes like, oh, yeah, 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 the prodigal son, right? Um, like it is so real for people to say, I want healing. I want the Father. I want what the Father can give. I want the wholeness that comes from like coming home. Like I just want like to be whole as a person in my home, right? And that is the home of the heart of Jesus, right? Whatever it is, you're like, my life has gone in a direction that I don't love, that I don't like, that makes me, a million different things that aren't whole, that aren't happy, that aren't joyful. Come back to the healing power of Jesus. Come back to reconciliation. Come back to the beauty of being at home in the heart of the Father who loves you so much and wants to restore and renew and revitalize you as a person so that he can call you to a beautiful vocation, whether that's the priesthood, whether that's marriage, whether that's, as a sister of life, whatever it is. Come back to the healing power of Jesus. When we try to heal ourselves, right? When we try to, or heal ourselves in the ways that the world tells us to heal ourselves, go to the ocean. The ocean's great. Being in nature, it is a healing thing, but it's not the same like healing hand of the power of the heart of Jesus, right? Like go back to the Lord. Whoever of you out there is listening, you're like, this is for me, right? You might have chills all over your body, like, oh my gosh, this is for me. It's go back to the Lord. As long as your heart is beating, the healing hand of the Lord's heart is for you, and it's available to you every single day, all the time, at any moment. It is for you.
Yeah, I think that's beautiful, and I think that's a great way to kind of wrap up and end on our last little note. I know you talked about your have a book that's coming out
Yeah.
soon, and I would absolutely love for you to kind of talk to my viewers about it. I think they would really, really like it.
Thank you. So, yes, I wrote a version of the Screw Tape Letters, but it is specifically for women. It's called Sincerely Stoneheart. I'll get this in the image here. It's called Sincerely Stoneheart. And if you want to know why I named the demon Stoneheart, you'll have to read the introduction. But it is about a deep exploration of what it is like to be a woman in our world today. Growing up, I go all the way back, like for women growing up, and so many of the lies that the enemy has spoken to us as women, in our friendships, in our experiences, in our relationships, in our own hearts, in shame. I've been working on this for 4 years, so I deep dive into so many parts of the human experience and being a woman in our culture today. So there are many, many letters. It's called Sincerely Stoneheart. Unmask the enemy's lies, find the truth that sets you free. Because the way that C.S. Lewis did it, it brings light. When I'm writing this, I'm like, oh my goodness. It's so clear how the enemy has been at work in my life and how I can fight back. I want to help women fight back against the lies of the enemy, against the despair and the sorrow and the discouragement they feel. So it's
Mhm.
available. You can order it wherever books are sold. It comes out in April. So if you're listening right now, it will be out in a couple of weeks. You can get it on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, anywhere like that. I think women everywhere, I hope women everywhere will love the clarity that it brings to their hearts and minds and lives of faith.
Yeah, no, that's beautiful. And I can't wait to read it because honestly, I just, I really think that it's important to recognize where Satan has a foothold in our lives so that we can cut off that foothold, or that foot in general.
Absolutely. Yes. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh, to fight back and say, I wasn't made for this. I wasn't
Mhm.
made for a life of sorrow and discouragement and despair. You were made for a life of freedom and hope and peace and joy. And the enemy doesn't want that for you. And it takes recognizing those places where he does have that foothold to say, okay, I see what's happening here and I'm going to cut this off and I'm going to fight back and I'm going to live in the freedom that God made me for. So I hope Sincerely Stoneheart will help so many women do just that. So thanks for allowing me to share about that.
Absolutely. And I think it'll be important because, like they say, if, the biggest lie Satan says is that he doesn't exist, it's the biggest one. And if we're not paying attention to him, then he's, trying to stalk us like a lion in tall
Mhm.
grass and we won't
Mm,
see when he pounces. So it's important
exactly.
to stay vigilant for sure. But thank you so much, Emily, for being on the podcast and for sharing your wisdom and just joy and insight. I think the women will really appreciate it. And where can my listeners find you?
Yes, if you go to emilywilsonministries.com, you can find my website. And I'm also on Instagram at EMWILSS. I share about life and femininity and motherhood and dating and all different kinds of things.
Awesome. I'll put all that in the show notes below so that people can easily find it. But with all of that being said, thank you again, Emily. It was great having you here.
Thank you for having me. We will talk again soon, hopefully.
Yes, definitely. I'd love to have you back on. And with all of that being said, guys, I hope you guys enjoy this podcast and you guys learned something, and I'll talk to you guys in the next one. Bye. Do you have questions or comments about today's episode? Email me at thereligioushippie@gmail.com or leave a voice message at anchor.fm/thereligioushippie. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Thank you for listening. Thank you for listening to this podcast. Please be sure to rate and review this episode. This podcast is produced by Amber Rose and distributed by Metacortex Publishing. This podcast is copyright by The Religious Hippie, NFP. Any previously trademarked or copyright content is used by permission. Information and opinions in this podcast should not be construed as medical advice. Please be sure to visit the official website for The Religious Hippie at thereligioushippie.com or find me on social media for other unique content. Thank you.